Good afternoon, everyone. My name is María José Castañeda, and together with my colleague Juan Camilo Rojas, we are very pleased to present our research project titled Undergraduate B2 Students' Perspectives on Vocabulary Acquisition Strategies through Multimodal Resources. This study was developed within the research project course at UNAP under the guidance of Professor Dani Cuellar, and I'll be covering the introduction, the problem statement, objectives, theoretical foundations, and methodology components. And then Juan will continue with the analysis, the discussion, and conclusions. So let's start with the data sheet. To begin, here's basically an overview of the structure of our study. So this work is framed as an empirical, classroom-based research paper within the research line of applied linguistics and ELT methodology. The study was conducted by both of us and supervised by Professor Dani Cuellar. And as you can tell here, the keywords basically summarize our central focus. So we have vocabulary acquisition, virtual learning, students' preferences, and multimodal resources. So these elements provide a very clear academic framework for the type of research that we carried out and the thematic scope it addresses. So following now, we're going to talk about the statement of the problem. So also multimodal resources, specifically we're talking about videos and movies, are increasingly used in English language teaching, especially in virtual education. It is still unclear how undergraduate students actually perceive these strategies. I mean, in terms of learning and retaining vocabulary. So this leads us to the essential so what question. Why does this matter? So by understanding students' perspective is crucial because ineffective or unsupported strategies may limit vocabulary development, particularly in virtual learning environments, where learners rely heavily on autonomous study habits. And in the specific context of UNAV, like a fully virtual university, students interact with digital tools on a daily basis. However, it's quite ironic because we still lack research that explores whether these multimodal strategies generally support meaningful and long-term vocabulary learning or they don't. So therefore, the problem lies in basically determining how students can actually experience, value, and make use of multimodal vocabulary learning strategies and whether these practices align with their real needs and preferences as we have highlighted by 10-2023. So rather than just solving a large-scale institutional problem, our goal is more focused to take advantage of this research opportunity to be able to actually understand in a clear manner how B2 learners make sense of vocabulary strategies in digital context and how these insights can later guide pedagogical decisions within UNAV. As we're talking now. So according to the objectives, we're going to have basically, of course, our general objective and specific objectives. So based on that context previously explained, our general objective was to identify students' perspectives on their preferred strategies for vocabulary acquisition through multimodal resources in virtual environments. To achieve this, we formulated two specific objectives, as you can see on screen. So the first one is to explore students' perceptions of short videos and movies as multimodal input for vocabulary learning, particularly in relation to vocabulary retention and oral fluency. And then second, to analyze this students' perspective on the role of feedback from both teachers and peers or classmates during the vocabulary learning process and how this whole feedback supports or don't the effective vocabulary use in virtual environments. So these objectives, as you can tell, guided the structure of our methodological design, the selection of instruments, and of course, the interpretation of the data. So now let's talk a little bit more about the theory. So we have brought here to your attention the three main literature review we want to check with you. The first one is about Mayer 2020. We're going to talk about the cognitive theory of multimedia learning. So Mayer explains that learning improves when information is presented through both verbal and visual channels. For our study, this theory is key because movies and short videos integrate images, sound, and context, helping students process vocabulary more efficiently and will reduce cognitive load. Moving on to question regarding the affective filter and motivation, Krushen emphasizes that factors like anxiety, confidence, and motivation influence language acquisition, and students often feel more relaxed and engaged when learning through videos or movies, which lowers the affective filter and allows vocabulary to be absorbed more naturally. And now, regarding Ossiville and the meaningful learning, Ossiville argues that this new knowledge is retained when it connects to prior experiences. So, multimodal resources support meaningful learning because they present vocabulary in rich, contextualized, and emotionally resonant situations. So, this explains why so many students prefer learning through scenes, stories, and visual input rather than isolated just like lists. So now that we have checked the literature review, let's go with the methodology and the context. So basically in here, moving on to this part, this study adopted a qualitative descriptive approach framed with an interpretative phenomenological analysis, which allowed us to explore students' lived experiences with vocabulary learning in virtual settings. Our participants were like B1, B2 undergraduate students enrolled between the fourth and the seventh semester at UNAP, and this population is particularly relevant because they are like kind of accustomed to virtual learning, autonomous study, and digital tools, which makes their perspectives on multimodal strategies as specifically meaningful. So to collect the data, we use complementary instruments. We use a Likert scale survey administered before and after the process, pre-tests to identify initial vocabulary knowledge, class recordings taken during real sessions from the Club de Inglés Sin Fronteras and OLC. And we also filled journals documenting classrooms interactions and, basically the reflections that we as researchers had. So the study was conducted over a 6-week period. And this allowed us to observe in a more consistent way the patterns in students' strategy use and engagement with the multimodal input. So by using these multiple instruments, we definitely strengthen the credibility of our findings by allowing us to triangulate students' perceptions. So with this overview of the problem, I will now give the microphone to Juan. He's going to continue with the data analysis, results, discussion, and the final conclusions of our research.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is a pleasure to be here with you and Maria Jose. So I'm going to talk about the results. According to the results, students prefer multimedia strategies such as video and songs over traditional word list. They value feedback from teachers and peers. Online dictionaries were widely used, but review habits were inconsistent, which affects long-term retention and oral fluency. A total of 52 percent of the students rated the use of visual aids as very good, followed by 29.4 who consider them good, giving us more than 70% of the students who consider this very good or good. Overall, the visual aids most frequently mentioned by students include images and short video clips, which appears to support their vocabulary learning effectively. Based on the survey responses, students favor learning vocabulary in context over traditional word lists. 9 out of 17 respondents, which is 53%, strongly agree that contextual learning is more effective, while only 12% choose neutral or none disagree with it. When comparing the perceived importance of feedback from teachers or peers with the students' feelings after class, the data reveals a strong alignment between valuing feedback and positive emotional outcome. Specifically, 50% rated feedback as extremely important and another 41% mark it as very important, meaning that more than 80% of the students see it as crucial part of vocabulary learning. All the latter correlates with high satisfaction levels. Students report feeling very satisfied after class, and another 41% feel satisfied, which means that 12% express dissatisfaction. These results suggest that the supportive learning environment where feedback is prioritized contributes significantly to a student's positive emotional experience and motivation during the and after the class. Okay, so these findings, the one I just mentioned, align with the multimedia learning theory of crash and view on comprehensible input, showing that multimedia resources foster autonomy, engagement, and meaningful learning while reducing the effective filter and supporting confidence. Students enjoy these activities and benefit from the emotional safety they provide. The study suggests that students favor multimodal and contextualized strategies which enhance comprehensive motivation and willingness to use new vocabulary in oral activities. Feedback from teachers and peers emerged as a key effective factor, boosting confidence and participation, yet inconsistent review habits indicate that multimodal input alone is insufficient for long-term retention, highlighting the need for structured consolidation practices. These insights, however, must be interpreted cautiously given the small sample size, the short 6-week duration, and the reliance on self-report perception rather than extended performance data. Feedback emerged as a central factor in the learning process, as it is not only guided students academically, but also build confidence and motivation. This highlights that vocabulary acquisition is not purely cognitive, it is equally social and emotional, shaped by interaction and support. Moreover, the use of triangulate data, combined surveys, observation, and journals, strengthened the credibility of the findings, ensuring that interpretations were grounded in multiple perspectives. We conclude that multimodal resources are more effective than traditional methods. Feedback is crucial and review habits must be strengthened. Future work should focus on oral fluency and practical vocabulary use. Multimodal and contextualized strategies such as video and songs enhance comprehension, motivation, and students' willingness to use new vocabulary in oral activities. Feedback from teachers and peers play a crucial role, acting as an effective facilitator that builds confidence and support activity vocabulary use. However, inconsistent review habits show that multimodal input alone is insufficient for long-term retention, highlighting the need for structured consolidation practices. Oral fluency remains a challenge, suggesting future work should connect vocabulary learning with authentic communicative context. Finally, triangulation of surveys, journals, and observations strengthened the credibility of these findings, though the short duration and reliance of self-report data mean that it should be interpreted as an indicative rather than a definitive conclusion. Our study is supported by foundational work from Mayer, multimodal learning, Krashen principles, Knowles, Hollack, Oswell, and recent research by Teng 2023 on multimodal input and vocabulary retention. So we came with these final recommendations for teachers. It is important to incorporate design structure review activities, such as weekly quizzes, spaced repetition flashcards, and short productive tasks that require students to reuse vocabulary learned through multimedia input. At the same time, teachers should avoid text-heavy material, integrate multiple multimedia resources, and provide consistent feedback to sustain motivation and confidence among students. Future strategies should emphasize oral fluency and adapt students' preferences, ensuring that vocabulary learning is both engaging and durable. For curriculum design, we came to the conclusion of developing lesson sequences that include pre-viewing activation, guided while viewing task, and post-viewing production and review, ensuring a coherent multimodal pathway for vocabulary development. For future research, we think that it should be interesting to conduct longitudinal studies with larger samples and objective performance measurements, for example, delay retention tests at least for 3 or 6 months to examine long-term vocabulary retention and compare different review strategies. That would be all for this presentation. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you very much for this enriching experience. We're just gonna stop right here to recording, and we hope this is helpful not only for teachers but also for the academic community itself.
Have a good one.
Mm.